Okay, for a displacement time graph, what does it tell us? First, it shows the variation of the displacement with time. And then how do we find velocity from a displacement time graph? Its gradient tells us the velocity. And how do we find gradients through calculus? We differentiate y with respect to x. In this case, the quantity on the y-axis is displacement, the quantity on the x-axis is time. So the derivative of displacement with respect to time gives us the velocity. Now for a velocity time graph, what does it tell us? Sabse pehle to it tells the variation of right. What else does it tell us? इसका gradient क्या बताएगा हमें? Gradient again is the quantity on the y-axis divided by the quantity on the x-axis. Velocity time में y पे velocity upon time. So what is velocity upon time? Acceleration. Gradient is acceleration. Negative gradient is called deceleration or retardation. Another thing, area क्या बताता है? Area is the product of the quantity on the y-axis and the quantity on the x-axis. So velocity into time क्या हो जाएगा? Displacement, not distance, displacement. Area under the graph is this clear? Now using calculus to do the same thing, velocity can be found by differentiating displacement with respect to time. And acceleration can be found by differentiating velocity with respect to time. Go the other way around, skolta karo. If I integrate acceleration with respect to time, what should I get? Velocity. If I integrate velocity with respect to time, what should I get? No, displacement. Please be careful with this. If I put limits on it, तो मुझे direct displacement मिल जाएगी. If I'm doing indefinite integrals, I must use a plus c. Is this clear? Okay. Now let's go through the first question. बिल्कुल लाजमी निकालनी पड़ेगी c की value. Let's go through the first question. Okay. Particle moves in a straight line so that t seconds after leaving a fixed point O, its velocity is given by this. So what are they trying to show? The moment the particle passed O, इसको इस तरह consider करो, you started your stopwatch. ये कहाँ लिखा हुआ है? सवाल में कह रहा है t seconds, t is a variable. Seconds, when your stopwatch is moving, your time is varying constantly. Is that right or wrong? So it is telling you that t seconds after leaving a fixed point O. So you started your stopwatch when the particle left O, जब उसने O से आगे चला है तो. Where P and Q are constants. When t is 1, the acceleration of the particle is 8. Time 1% acceleration बता दी. And when t is 2, the displacement of the particle is 22. ये दो बातें उन्होंने हमें बता दी. Find the value of P and Q. उन्होंने velocity और time का कोई link नहीं दिया, so I cannot put any values in this equation. How do we find the equation of acceleration? इसको differentiate करेंगे. Differentiating velocity with respect to time gives us acceleration. And similarly, how do we find displacement? Integrating velocity with respect to time. Acceleration हमारे पास क्या आएगी? 2p plus 2pt plus q. t की जगह 1 डालेंगे and the entire thing will be equal to 8. This is one equation with two unknowns. What about displacement? When I integrate it, what do I get? This is what I get. Is that right? c कैसे निकलेगा? सबसे पहली बात है, गौर से देखो. डिस्प्लेसमेंट कहां से बताई जा रही है? 22 meters from O. When time is 0, what is the displacement from O? 0. दोनों को 0 डालोगे तो c की वैल्यू क्या आएगी? 0 आ जाएगी. So please be careful about this. We are not ignoring c. पहले c तो निकाल लें. Once we find c, then we get the equation of displacement, which is नहीं, c निकालने की जरूरत है. या 0 और 22 लिमिट्स लगाओ, दो में से एक काम करो. Either use definite integrals. If you are not using definite integrals, c is must, even if you are getting the value of c as 0. This is the equation of displacement. इसमें time अगर मैं 2 डालूं, so the value of displacement is 22. Solve these two equations simultaneously and tell me what do you get. are the values of P and Q that you must get by solving these two equations simultaneously. Now let's come to a much more difficult question. A particle moves in a straight line such that its displacement s from a fixed point O at time t seconds is given by this. They have given us two different equations. These are called piecewise function. No one will ask you the name, just letting you know for your general knowledge, SAT वगैरह के exams दो तो piecewise functions. Piecewise के क्या मतलब होता है? टुकड़ों में. Displacement and time are a function, but 0 till 3 it is obeying this equation, and after 3 it is obeying this equation. So you can find displacement with respect to time, but देखना पड़ेगा किस time पे आपको displacement निकालनी. So the question is asking us find the first part is asking us the initial velocity of the particle. How do we do that? Initial का क्या मतलब है? Very starting of the experiment, that means the value of time is 0. You can plug in the value of time as 0, but in which equation? Do we have an equation for velocity? Do we have a function for velocity? How do we find the velocity function? Differentiating what? Displacement function. Very good. Differentiate the displacement function. How do we differentiate? ln t plus 1, t plus 1 the denominator, and numerator में उसका derivative which is 1, so it is 1 upon t plus 1. Initial का मतलब है time 0. So the initial velocity is, इसको v0 भी कहते हैं, v0 भी कहते हैं, which is 1 meter per second. असल में we often deal with many different velocities in such questions, many different displacements. So we try to name our velocities ताकि हमें अगर आगे use करना हो तो हमें पता हो which velocity are we talking about. Is this clear? Yes, ऐसे ही लिखा हुआ है ना. So the velocity of the particle when t is 4. Now we'll need an equation for velocity, and now we'll get that by differentiating this one. How do we differentiate it again? जैसे इसको किया था. What will this be? Half ही रहेगा. Half ही रहेगा. इसका derivative ln t minus 2 का 1 upon t minus 2. What about this one? 1 upon t plus 1. And what about this one? Zero. ln 16 is a constant. It is just a value. There is no variable in it. It is just a numerical constant. What is the equation for velocity or the velocity function? This must be your velocity function. And we'll plug in the value of t as 4 in this one, because for the domain t greater than 3, this is the equation of displacement that was being obeyed. What is the value of v? Velocity at 4 seconds. I suggest you write or label these velocities, because if you need to use them in the further parts, you must know कि कौन सी वाली velocity कब निकाली थी. I'm calling this v4 because it's when the time is 4. Then the third part is asking me the acceleration of the particle when t is 4. How will I do that? Very good. We will differentiate v with respect to time. Differentiate v with respect to time. Tell me, what do you get? Now, how do we differentiate this? First, we can write the velocity function in this way. T minus 2 to the power minus 1 upon 2 minus t plus 1 to the power negative 1. Now, can we differentiate both of these brackets individually? And what do we get? Acceleration is minus half t minus 2 squared, and minus 1 जब यहाँ multiply होगा, so this becomes plus 1, and t plus 1 की power will become negative 2. उसको नीचे लाता हूँ तो squared होगी. Now what do I need to do? T की जगह what value should I plug in? 4. And tell me the acceleration that you get. That must be minus 0.085 meter per second squared. The next part is asking the value of t when the particle is instantaneously at rest. At rest means that the velocity is 0. So you'll plug in the velocity of as 0 and find the value of t. So rest means that the velocity is 0. V की जगह 0 plug in करके we'll solve to get the value of t. Okay, now the last part is asking us something. What is the value of t? पहले मुझे जरा बता दो. The value of t is 5. Yes. The value of t is 5. Now the fifth part is asking the distance traveled by the particle in the 4th second. How do we find the distance traveled in the 4th second? We can find S4, displacement after 4 seconds. What is displacement? You can understand displacement is how far is the particle from O. O से 4 सेकंड के बाद कितना दूर है, माइनस O से 3 सेकंड के बाद कितना दूर है. That will give you your displacement, or sorry, the distance traveled in the 4th second, S4 minus S3. S4 कैसे निकालोगे? दूसरी इक्वेशन से. S3 कैसे निकालोगे? पहली इक्वेशन से. Right? These are the two equations that you will use. 4, you will plug in this. वो बताएगा कि after 4 seconds, how far is your particle from the point O. When you will plug in 3 in this one, that will tell you how far your particle is from O after 3 seconds. 4th second के बाद इतनी दूर था, 3 seconds के बाद इतनी दूर था. When you subtract both the displacements, you will get the distance that the particle traveled in the 4th second. Is this clear? Do it जल्दी से शाबाश. So this is your displacement after 4 seconds and the displacement after 3 seconds. When you subtract both of them, you get the distance that the particle traveled in the 4th second, which is 0.123 meters. अगर exact कहता तो LNT terms में we would have had to leave the answer. Is this clear? Now let's give another question a try. Okay, class, let's go through this question. How do we know that the particle is never at rest? Rest का मतलब है velocity 0 करते हैं. If the velocity is 0, we do not get any solution. E to the power 2t is negative. We know e की power कुछ भी करते हैं, the value never becomes negative for real numbers, and hence we will not get any solution. Students go a step further and apply log on both sides, and then they realize that the input of log can never be negative, इसलिए इसका कोई solution नहीं होगा. Now the next one, the question says, please be very careful. The question says exact value of t. That means ln e, जिसके terms में you have to leave it as it is. For which the acceleration of r is 12 meters per second. How do I find acceleration? If I differentiate velocity with respect to time, I'll get the function of acceleration. और उसमें a की जगह what do I need to plug in? 12. a की जगह 12 plug in करो, solve and tell me the value of t that you get. कहीं भी rounding off नहीं करनी होती है whenever we are concerned about exact value. Now in the next one, the question is asking, showing all your working, find the distance traveled by r in the interval between t is equals to 0.4 and 0.5. We'll integrate velocity to get the equation for displacement. Do not forget c. और फिर इसमें s 0.5 और 0.4 निकाल के we'll subtract both of them, get our distance traveled. I do not know the numerical value. This has been quoted by students. You can find it on your own and tell me what do you get.